Welcome to the latest transmission of Rice Against the Grain. Today we will be breaking away from the dungeon programming with returning guest Jason Breshears from Archaix. I will have a link down below in the video description and above for the playlist that includes part 1 and part 2 of his first appearance. If you haven't watched those episodes or you're unfamiliar with Archaix, I encourage you to watch those before continuing with today's interview. Before we get into it, make sure you visit ricetvx.com and sign up for my mailing list so you never miss an update or new Rice TVX and Rice Against the Grain content. You will also find links to all of my various channels as well as my social media. Make sure you're following both of my YouTube channels, Rice TVX as well as Rice Against the Grain. And due to censorship, make sure you follow me on other alternative platforms such as Rumble and Odyssey, where I do post up exclusive content. If you want to support Rice TVX, be sure to check out and join my Patreon channel, where you will get early access to my videos with no ads, unedited. You will also get exclusive content and more. I will include links in the video description for everything I just mentioned, as well as everything shared on today's video. All right, joining me on today's show is a returning guest. I am joined by Jason Breshears from Archaix. If you're not familiar with him, I will have links down below for not only his YouTube channel, his website, but also the playlist that includes our very first time connecting, which was broken up into 2 parts. But this is officially Jason's second time on the channel. The first time he came on Rice TVX on a Stranger Than Fiction episode. And since then, I have deleted all the Stranger Than Fiction content from Rice TVX and started a new channel and been reposting the older interviews, including the conversations with Jason over on Rice Against the Grain. So make sure you subscribe to both channels. But without further ado, Jason, welcome back to the show. How's it going, my friend?
I'm doing good, buddy. I'm doing good, man. I'm glad to be back.
Well, thank you, man. Thank you again. I always appreciate your time and appreciate the conversations. And once again, I appreciate all the time that you put in to what you do as a researcher, as a historian, as a chronologist, the wealth of information that you've accumulated and collected. So I encourage people to check out those first conversations that we did together, especially part 1, because it's really an introduction to what Archaix is and Jason's research and such. And I don't really want to repeat too much from that. I want to expound. So I was telling Jason I wanted to kind of get some clarification on some of the things that we had talked about. And the first thing that I wanted to get clarification on from you, my friend, you're good. The first thing that I wanted to get clarification on was you were talking about Earth, the moon, everything. I believe the Phoenix phenomenon, the black satellite, all coming from a common origin.
Yes.
You were talking about this, and I was re-listening to the episode, but I'm not quite sure you specifically said what that common origin is.
Okay. Yes, it is the focus of Archaix, and it's not where Archaix began; it's where it ended. It's I started studying ancient calendrical systems, timekeeping systems, the way different cultures basically assessed their chronological values, because calendars teach us a whole lot about the cultures that practice them, and they had different meanings. But one common denominator, a thread that I had found going all the way back to the 3rd and 4th millennium BC, is that these oldest and the most sophisticated mathematical calendars and the oldest calendars all seem to stem from these major cataclysmic episodes that happened with mathematical predictability. And this is why the ancients seem to be so fixated on counting the number of days between significant events. And they weren't really focused on years. They didn't care about years. This is why the Mayan long count, the Quiche, the Olmec, Zapotec calendars, they're day count systems. Just like the Mayan Bacton of 13 Bactons is 144,000 days each. And this is what I've brought to the table in the Sumerian studies as well, showing that these 432,000, what people thought were years, pushing Anunnaki and Sumerian history back far beyond anything that it could have been viable. Those were actually stellar systems where they counted the turnings of the stars. And so I've had to go in depth and show people that 432,000 turnings of the stars isn't years, it's 12 centuries. And it abbreviates everything, putting Sumerian history and culture into the historical record where it belongs, and not some fantasy stuff going way back in the past. So these calendars stem from an event, a massive cataclysm, and in the traditions we refer to it as the Nemesis cataclysm. It is the origin of our own world being where it is today. It's the reason the moon appeared late in history. While we have pre-Selenite races that actually boasted to other later races that they could verify their antiquity because they had records from when they existed in a time before the moon appeared in the sky. These were the pre-Selenites. So history was divided in the ancient world between those civilizations that were before the moon appeared and those that were after the moon appeared in the sky. And then a significant time goes by, 1,600 years, and there's another cataclysm, and there's a birth of new calendars. Then there's the Ogygian deluge, which starts the birth of new calendars. We had the Gihon flood, the capture of Luna. Each one of these started new calendars, but each one of these events started new calendars, connecting to cataclysms of the appearance of new things in our sky, which cause things to happen on Earth. So this is what the focus of Archaix is, just showing that the legends and traditions and the ancient texts of the world support catastrophism, and that they basically began all their civilizations after catastrophic resets that were all connected to things that appeared in our skies that all stem from a prior date, when we had two stars in our system, not one sun. We had Nemesis and Sol, and Sol was very small and far away, and Nemesis was close to us, but something happened to it. It folded in on itself. It became a compressed star, what physicists call frozen stars or dark stars. And once this happened, many of the things around Nemesis were catapulted out towards Sol. And this would be Luna, which is our moon, Electra, which is a world that now became the asteroid belt. It has been destroyed. Our own world has come here. Now, I don't want to confuse your listeners, because you know I'm a simulationist. You know that I believe that everything in the sky is absolutely simulated, and that we're seeing a picture of the heavens as conveyed to us from a technological source, that we are existing inside a technological medium right now, basically a type of virtual reality, not a real world.
Okay, well, you said the sky is simulated. Do you, like, based off like our past conversation, we live in a simulacrum, that would the entire thing would be simulated, right? What we see as our existence is simulated from your research.
Yeah, I believe the sky is purely optics. It's a multi-layered hologram that's hiding something else. We've got some really compelling video footage and photographs of the moon, when the dark part of the moon is actually transparent, and stars that are behind the moon have been photographed. That's not possible if the moon was opaque. That's not possible if the moon was truly a solid, as it appears to be most of the time. And it's not just that. There are many photographs of the heavens that do not comport with what we're given by the scientific community. These beautiful pictures of all these colored stars and all, that's not what people with high-powered telescopes are seeing. The more they magnify stars, the more they see these oscillating fields. They don't see, the more they study Jupiter, they don't see this beautiful CGI image of Jupiter with this eye that NASA produces and says it's coming from their most powerful telescopes and probes. That's not what people with telescopes are seeing. They're seeing a blob of light that acts like an oscillating field. And So we are 100% dependent on a government agency that's always maintained a high level of secrecy on how they do things, not only in how they spend the money, but on how they even acquire all this data. 100% of what we are told to believe about the world above the area of the sky that we can actually optically see. 100% of that data comes from the government. And this is what people really need to consider before they go to thinking that all these astronomy pictures that you're seeing in these books are actually real representations of what's out there.
Okay, well, listen to what you're saying. I would more say that in our simulacrum, that what we see in the sky is a hologram or holographic, but this Earth and everything else is still part of the simulation. The trees that we see, the ground that we walk on, the air we breathe is just. I just want to get distinguishment. Is there? Is
I see where you're going. Yes. Okay. Well, first of all, in the simulacrum, you 100% are inside a virtual reality universe, but there is absolutely no way from a subjective position subject to the filters of the central nervous system will you ever be able to prove that to yourself. It is entirely an intellectual exercise because we are immersed into a medium that has us jacked into it. So we are jacked in through the optics, we are jacked in through the olfactory senses, through our touch. All our senses are filters that actually have us processing these things as physicality. And the brain, this whole central nervous system, it's the bridge between the psyche and the simulation. And this was why it makes it so difficult for people who have believed they're in a physical world all their lives to actually intellectually disengage from that idea. It's very difficult. And this is why I never push people for it, because 100% of the Archaix output doesn't need simulation theory. That just happens to be a personal conclusion of mine that makes sense of all the data sets.
And I get that, and I appreciate you explaining that. You also mentioned Nemesis and Sol. So are they completely separate and different from our sun and moon that we call today?
Okay, the model of the solar system.
And then a follow up was Nemesis. Is there something to do with Nemesis and Nemesis X? Are they the same?
Okay, I'll answer both. The model of the solar system that we're provided is based off all the data points and data sets that NASA has put together from their readings. This isn't necessarily optics. They have a lot of other types of instruments that basically interpret all the different types of signals that they're receiving from the sky. What these signals convey in a 3D model is a solar system with a sun in the middle. I'm not saying it's true. What I'm saying is this is the model of the sky. The energy and signals coming from the sky produces a certain 3D image once they're interpreted. And when NASA interprets this, they see a heliocentric system, and they see all these planets rotating around a sun when they interpret these signals, because you really can't see them through telescopes. You just see lights and oscillating fields. But once this is rendered 3D, it's a beautiful thing, because now it has all these different things that are pointing to the existence of another star. And what I mean is that the Titius-Bode law is very specific, that the mathematical distribution of the worlds that orbit our soul, our sun, is perfect except for one deviation. And that deviation is the position of Earth. We are tucked in between the orbits of Venus and Mars, and there's not supposed to be an orbital belt here. Additionally, the closer an object is to the surface of the sun, like Mercury and Venus, the more perpendicular the axis is. This is very telling, because starting with Earth, now we have a 23.5 degree obliquity. That means our world is spinning, but it's on an axis that is tilted at 23.5 degrees. This is scientifically referred to as obliquity, but it gets worse with Mars. It's even worse with Jupiter, and then Saturn's even worse, and then Uranus is on its side, and it switches places with Neptune. This means that the further away an orbiting object is away from its parent soul, the lesser that it has a gravitational hold on it.
Which makes
But it
sense.
also indicates the existence of another attracting body that is large and local, or these axes would not be turned at 23.5 degrees.
Interesting.
Now,
Interesting.
what has been postulated in astrophysics is that we have a very dark and very small but super powerful collapsed star very close to us right now in the southern system. This would be referred to in the ancient Sumerian Akkadian records as the deep, because anything below 30 degrees south latitude was unknown to the ancients, because every single civilization of technological sophistication in the ancient world was on the equator or 30 degrees north latitude. Now, all of that changed after the cataclysm, but before the cataclysm, they were all north of the equator, all the civilizations. They did not have any star maps of the southern hemisphere. There's nothing. Everything in all the zodiacs and all the star depictions of all the civilizations from China, Yangtze Valley, all the way around to from Dendera in Egypt, the two Egypts, all the Greek, all the Armenian, all their knowledge of the stars, everything is from the equatorial zone, zodiacal belt, which is 23.5 degrees and 30 degrees north latitude. No one in the ancient world knew anything about the southern hemisphere stars. So it's the southern hemisphere stars, referred to as the great deep, the ocean below, that we have this anomaly. This anomaly is something that is very powerful down there, is tugging on all these bodies. And this is what physicists postulate. They think whatever it is, it's pulling so hard that the further an object is away from the surface of the sun, it creates more and more drag. And this is why these perpendicular axes get further and further and further tilted till they're totally sideways, because the outer worlds don't rotate around the sun like the rest of the worlds do. They roll around the sun. And that's because something down there has pulled them. This is also why the worlds, like the closer to the surface of the sun, the more they're on what's called the plane of the ecliptic. The plane of the ecliptic is the sun's equator. Mercury's perfectly on it. Venus has a slight deviance. Earth deviates terribly off that ecliptic, up and down. Mars does too. The asteroid belt is like a toroidal field that goes around this equatorial, concentrated at this equatorial area, and then Jupiter deviates terribly from the equator. This is why the wandering stars of ancient times, the planets, always deviated in the zodiac. They never could really predict how high or low they would be in that 30-degree arc of the sky, because of this drag. And this drag is only answered for, just like the obliquity of all the worlds, it's only answered for another body inside the solar system, very local, that we can't see. And it's easy for it to be there and be undetected, because the collapsed or frozen star is a star that's equally as bright as our sun. The problem is the gravity well has folded in on itself. It's become so powerful that the light photons only go out a certain distance and then they fold back in. And without light photons escaping, we'll never be able to see it. It's just a black spot between 2 or 3 stars in the sky.
And what do you equate that to be?
That's Nemesis. This is what
Nemesis X.
No, Nemesis X is an object that used to orbit Nemesis. It now orbits Sol. Phoenix is an object that used to orbit Nemesis. It now orbits Sol. Our moon is a planet. It's not even a moon. Most people don't understand the concept of.
Is it a planet or is it holographic?
It's a okay. Check this out. You are confusing 2 different paradigms. What I am describing to you is that we're being fed data of a place that is real, but it's not real here. We are inside the simulacrum, which is a copy of a real reality. But the things that we were able to do in scientific exploration are not possible on the outside without also cross-contaminating the real universe. There are things that go on inside the simulacrum that have been allowed to play out, but these aren't the type of things that are allowed outside of the simulacrum. Outside of the simulacrum, it's a very clean environment. Inside here, everything's been allowed. We can run all kinds of tests and there's no risk of cross-contamination with the real reality. What we're seeing in the sky is signals that are fed to us so that we will figure things out on our own from a safe environment where there's really no consequences for our actions in here. We think there are, and we basically equate that with death. I'm not telling you there's real planets out there. I'm telling you we're in the simulacrum and that all of this is holographic and we're inside it, but we're in here for a very definitive reason. You and I just might be hooked to virtual reality, some type of cerebral interface holography technology, and we might be laying in the same room, and there may be a couple girls over here, and we've only been in here for 19 hours, and people are checking our vitals, but we think we've lived 82 lifetimes. And the whole time we're here, we know each other, but in different avatars, and we've lived through many lifetimes together because we're scientists trying to figure something out from inside the simulacrum. We might be on a capital ship leaving a destroyed Nemesis system, running projections right now, trying to figure out under what biospheric conditions would be best for the propagation and survival of our species. This is why we do so much research on Mars, and we run so many projections. The vapor canopy world of Venus, we run so many data projections on it. What I'm saying is that we have enough data now to conclude that our reality is artificial. Therefore, this opens the door for new intellectual exercises. Because we have assessed that A, B, and C are true, then D opens up the possibilities as to the why. So that's what Archaix is about. I've already made the assessment that we're living in an artificial world. Now I'm at the stage, I'll be on that now, but I used to be at the stage as to answering why. So I have to go with the data that has been fed us inside this system. And inside this artificial holography, that data that has been fed to us is all related to catastrophic resets and the survivability of different biospheres when new calendars were created. This is what I have concluded. The whole reason we're here is to run projections and to see how humans can survive different biospheres like vapor canopy worlds, desert worlds, Arctic tundras. We have lived for periods where it wasn't even survivable on the surface, and we continued in the underworld. So we've even found those communities. I don't know if you're aware of the 58 or 59 underground cities that have been discovered in Cappadocia of Turkey. The Grand Canyon has an underground city, and a lot of people have dismissed it without understanding what really happened.
There's some in Mexico as well.
Yes, there's underground cities in South America. I mean, Google is being sanitized. You used to be able to find this everywhere, but a lot of these are being hidden. My next video, which will be posted today on Archaix, is all about ancient and modern underground cities and why they exist, showing the locations, showing very interesting things about them. But my point is this: I'm already beyond ABC. I'm at D. Now I'm showing my listeners, hey, listen, this is why we're doing this. Look at this calendar. Look at this calendar. Look at this calendar. All the traditions attached to these individual timekeeping systems. What actually happened? What cataclysms? What appeared in the sky when that happened? Everything is the result of the Nemesis cataclysm. When that other star, when our binary sister star collapsed, it did so only after it sent out what Ben Davidson calls, of suspicious observers, an impactor event. This is when a star ejects material right before it's going to go implode. The star ejects material. That material freezes in space. It becomes all this hard shell of rock. Then it blasted into space as impactors. Here's a whole bunch of meteorites, asteroids, all that going in all different directions. And then it implodes and it folds in on itself, no longer producing light. But the concussive blast is big enough to send Phoenix, Earth, Luna, Electra, Nemesis X object, Dark Satellite. These are the objects I've documented. They all catapulted out into space. And now, being away from the gravity well of an imploding star, now they're subject to the gravity well of Sol, which is our sun. And when Nemesis imploded, the only objects that were here were Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. That's all that was here. This is the Titius-Bode law. It shows the mathematical distribution of these worlds from the surface of the sun is always by a factor of like pi. The distance from Mercury to the surface of the sun is times 3 the distance is exactly where you find Venus. Venus's distance from the surface of the sun times 3 is where you find Mars. Earth was never supposed to be tucked in between. There's no orbital belt here. And this is why we suffer this obliquity and this elongated orbit. Now, you have to understand, I'm not talking from the perspective of an actual physical solar system. I am speaking from the perspective of the signals that the simulacrum has given us to interpret 3D as a system that is out there. I'm not telling you that there's anything in the sky. I'm telling you just the opposite. It's all holography.
I mean, when I listen to you talk, man, about some of this stuff, it's just like my mind is just constantly being blown by the information. I mean, it's again, like it's hard for me to be able to catch up with the plethora of work that you have to be able to get a full understanding of all this. So I really do appreciate you taking time to explain things.
Well, since we did our last podcast, I have simplified it too, because other people come to this cognitive wall, and I get that. And many of the videos that I've released show ancient paintings and woodcuts of different times in history in 1561, in 1566, in 1752, in 1890. We have this evidence of people looking up into the sky during a time when the sky sim failed, when the holography lost whatever power source it had temporarily, and for a few hours people looked up into the sky and saw what was actually there, as opposed to what this holographic net shows us. And people describe machinery and vast objects for which they have no frames of reference. They're inexplicable. And I've released a few videos about that, showing that, look, man, it's not the first time. Even in ancient times, people noticed that the sky just suddenly disappeared, and in its place was machinery, was things that were cogwheels. It was just, they didn't know how to describe these things. Shields and swords and geometrical
it's like a glitch in a matrix or something like that.
Yeah, it's like whatever powers the sky sim, it just temporarily lost power. So,
well, this idea that we have that what we're experiencing in a simulacrum, in a simulated reality via our avatars, that there could be a physical us outside of the construct that is learning from all these various experiences. I mean, that in and of itself is it's almost like was it Ridley Scott movie? I know I'm probably getting the director's name wrong off the top of my head. The director from Alien and Prometheus. Have you seen the movie Prometheus? Because it kind of it made me think about Prometheus when you were talking a little bit. And not that they were going through simulations, learning things, but they were exploring. They were kind of trying to go to the source of where we came from, our makers. And
I really don't think it's that mysterious, man. I really believe that this is why I call it the simulacrum. And I understand I'm a good old Texas boy. I'm going to say it the way I want to say it, but I understand I'm mispronouncing this old Latin word. But
simulacrum, however you want to pronounce it. I mean, it's a tomato.
Yeah, it's an old Latin word. It's not a word I invented. It's a very old word, very old dictionaries, but it describes a copy of something else. I am totally on board with another world being just like ours, where things are real. They're just fundamentally different. We are in a world where this predator versus prey ecosphere thrives, and I don't believe that the real universe is like that at all. I believe that this was specifically created in here like this for us to mature, for these hardships to be in here, for us to be able to overcome and to learn and to do things in here that we're actually safe from out there.
And again, man, I really appreciate you taking time to kind of like explain some of this for me. It really means a lot. To go back into some of the research with the Phoenix phenomenon, you said it's going back to my notes, it's every 138 years. Is that correct?
Every 138 years, there seems to be an editing that's taking place in our world. Calendars begin and end, new translations of books suddenly appear, new social conditions, new geopolitical conditions. Sometimes migrations occur that are spontaneous, and they're covered up in these clever resets that are masked as natural phenomena. Earthquakes, volcanoes, tsunamis. And yeah, not every 138 years is there a cataclysm, but every 138 years we've got documented for 58 centuries these unusual events, these Mandela effects, these synchronicities and coincidences that people can only really see 10 and 20 years later when they look back and say, hey, do you remember this? Or, hey, do you remember that? Or, hey, why the hell did they have all those orphan trains back then? And people are at a loss. They realize, damn, there's a whole section of history that they lived through, but they don't remember any of it.
Yeah, I mean, they were apparently selling babies. I mean, they had like baby incubators and stuff like that at world fairs and stuff. I've seen some interesting things from that time period, but you're saying the last Phoenix event would have taken place based on your research, 1902, and the next one that we would experience would be 2040. I want to touch on the 2040, come back to that. But with 1902, in the last conversation that we had, you had mentioned people that we may consider to be elite, part of ancient families or bloodlines, unseen rulers. In the 1902 reset or 1902 Phoenix phenomenon, did those type of individuals go underground or do something to try to preserve themselves in case there was a cataclysm?
No doubt. There's no doubt. Absolutely. Listen, since
and that's where we had that burst of technology and all this shit just coming out of nowhere in 1902.
That's exactly right. Listen, once I released 3 videos on 1902 rapidly to show people how much data there was that I could find. I did not know the floodgates that I was going to open. I will be releasing another 1902 video, but people all over the world have sent me books that were published in 1902, 1903, 1904. My library is full of them right now. I have books on my floor. I have so much to get through. They sent me emails and they sent me JPEG images of microfiche from their own communities. These videos sparked just this hunger for knowledge. People all over the world have been going through their own communities' records, trying to figure out if anything unusual in 1902 happened, and they're all finding amazing things. Some people are walking through cemeteries and taking pictures and showing these clusters of tombstones, showing. It's amazing the newspaper clippings I'm getting from people about this. It is something unusual that happened. And yes, it's like the Rockefellers. We know down in 1902, the Rockefellers claimed to have been on a retreat. But the more we research 1899, 1900. Now it's not just 1902.
Right. Well, they would have had to have prepared for it because it just wouldn't have all gone underground in one specific time.
There is a silence with the movers and shakers of the world. 1899, 1900, 1901. And then in 1902, they all pop back up, but they don't just pop back up. I have a full list published on YouTube, and my subscribers have provided me way more of all the institutions, organizations, all the government groups, social groups, all the corporations and companies that suddenly just appeared on the world scene in 1902, all the new inventions, like Carrier comes out with air conditioning in 1902, all the things that we take for granted in our infrastructure today that we thought were just gradual things. No, they almost all appeared in 1902 as if they existed prior to 1902, but sequestered away for a while until it seemed like the coast was clear. And then all of a sudden, when they realized the coast was clear, they unleashed. I'm talking about new translations to the Bible. So many of them came out in 1901 and 1902. New translations to ancient Akkadian and cuneiform texts. New translations to all. It's almost as if somebody had spent a lot of time acquiring libraries from all over the world and just hit them. And then in 1902, just started paying all kinds of people to help them make copies of all this stuff and re-release all this data back into the surface. I believe this was done in underground repositories. And I speculate that because we have some very unusual changes that came upon the world as well 138 years exactly before 1902 in 1764. But 1902, yes, it's amazing. It's almost as if the elite realized, okay, we had this red dust. It just blanketed our entire world. 50 tons of red dust and mud blanketed all over Australia per square mile. Ship captains in 1902 had to call all hands on deck just to sweep all this red mud that was falling out of the blue sky before their ships capsized. This red dust fell all over the entire world in 1902. Continued in 1903 until it faded away. And it was studied in 1902 in Rome and in the United States. And both labs determined that it was in between 40 and 80% organic materials. And two scientists in Rome even published a report saying they were convinced that the red dust had blood in it. Now, I'm not saying it did. I'm just telling you what the report said. So
Yeah.
this is the Phoenix phenomenon. The Phoenix phenomenon, it does this. It's this really unusual effect. It was really bad in the Bronze Age times, through the Greek and Roman times, all the way up to the vanishing of the Mayan culture. That red dust phenomenon is mentioned in Egyptian. Pharaoh Seknakti, Ramesses IV, they all mentioned this red dust phenomenon and how the sun always darkened and Typhon appeared in the sky. Typhon is the Greek the Fiend, which is the phoenix, which Fiend is just the opposite mirrored of the Egyptian Noph. If you don't know this already, almost every word in Greek reversed is an Egyptian word. It's a mirroring effect, and the reason this came to be is because the Egyptians and the Greeks wrote from totally different opposite directions, and when they translated things, they wrote in reverse. This is why the Greek goddess Athene in reverse is the Egyptian goddess Neith. It's the same thing for the Egyptian Noph. The phoenix reversed is Fiend. This is where we get Phoenix.
That's I mean, that's really interesting. I mean, again, you say all these things that just kind of like put a wrench in things that I have no, like I never would have put that connection together. With what you said about prior to 1902 and these elites, these ancient families or unseen rulers or whatever, we have another, based on your research, the next Phoenix phenom event would be 2040.
Yes.
Which I do want to get into the combination of what is going to be coming with that here in just a little bit. But I saw we're recording this on the 2nd of February, and I'm going to release it in just a few days. But yesterday you had a conversation that I wanted to highlight to people to make sure that they do watch, because I need to watch it with suspicious observers. But you were also featured in a video from Anonymous. Did you know that? Like yesterday? Did somebody tell you?
No, that's news to me.
Yeah, I'll send you a link to it on your email after we're done. It's the last part of one of the videos released yesterday on Anonymous Official. And it was combining other people's research too about, I'm not sure if they used the word solar flares or what they were using, but something happening in 2046 based off this guy's information on research of the sun.
Douglas, are you talking about Douglas Vogt?
It may be. I don't remember the guy's name. I just remember that you were featured in it. Now, they were talking about Ray Kurzweil, who I think he came up with the term singularity, but he's projecting singularity by 2045, which is a transhuman movement merging man and machine ultimately. And I also have been hearing like chitter chatter about wealthy people acquiring underground facilities and building underground facilities as if they're preparing for something.
They actually started doing that in the 90s. Yes, I'm very well aware of that. Many Hollywood actors and actresses, they've even pulled their money together to build facilities where they're actually underground communities. Yes.
And do you feel like the idea of the singularity, like us merging with machine, possibly potentially even before 2040, and the combination of these wealthy, rich, elite, famous people going underground or trying to survive the next Phoenix event taking place in 2040, is that what's going on?
Yeah, well, look, somewhere down the road, somewhere, we don't know when this exactly happened, but somewhere down the road, the people that we call the elite not only lost sight of where we were at in the Phoenix chronology, but they totally lost the calendar itself. They know the exact years to expect. They knew about 1764. They sure as hell knew about 1626. They knew about 1902. The problem is somewhere they've lost a 138-year period. They were thinking, that's why they all hid. They were thinking 1902 was going to be the big one. See, the Phoenix phenomenon is cyclical. It has these cycles and epicycles, meaning they're all based off 138 increments, but sometimes they're really, really bad at the 552 year mark, which is
so they're not exactly well, as I said, they're not exactly the same thing, right? Like they don't repeat themselves unless they repeat themselves in cyclical patterns.
Yes, it's always every 138 years, but it's every 552 years when it's terribly bad. Now, it's 552 years is somewhere they lost sight of when the next 552 year period was, and they were thinking that in 1902 that was going to be the big one, but it's not. It's 2040, and we know this by many different species of analysis now. But it's easy to say that in retrospect, having done all this research now. I don't know what they had access to, but I do know this, that we have about 9 different accounts from the historical record of when Phoenix has been specifically predicted. This tells me that there has been in existence a corpus of knowledge that has been passed down from some people to generation to generation. So whoever these people are that are in possession of it today, it has to be the elite. They're the only ones that acted on it in 1902. So yeah, they lost sight. Somewhere they lost track of when the big one was going to be.
And that's what they thought was going to take place in 1902, and that's what they're preparing for in 2040.
They were prepared. Yeah, they were prepared. They almost collapsed the economies of the world in the Boer Wars and in the 1890s. Yeah, they were fully prepared. Then in 1902, like a breath of fresh air, they came out and they unleashed all their innovations, technologies, all that. They even created all these offices to legitimize their control over the world, such as the Patent Office and the U.S. Census Bureau. All these things were creations. And in 1902, they even changed the official bird of the United States. A lot of people don't know this, but anybody can look it up.
You said it was. I mean, I don't mean to interrupt you, man. I'm so sorry. The Phoenix was the official bird of America, the United States, prior to 1902.
Damn right. On the Great Seal of the United States, it was a phoenix. It was known as a phoenix. There is no mistaking the bird because the founding fathers said it was a phoenix on the Great Seal. Then in 1902, they quietly changed it to the bald eagle.
Why was that? I wasn't intending to ask you that, but why?
Why they did it, I don't know. But it seems like in the 1700s and in the 1800s, Phoenix was in all the alchemical literature. It's all in the government. There's Phoenix statues all over the government buildings. Even Thales of Miletus had a statue in Washington D.C., and he predicted the darkening of the sun. He predicted the Phoenix phenomenon in 583 BC, and it happened. So he's famous for that. Now, that was Thales of Miletus. Now, all of a sudden in 1902, it seems like they wanted to take all focus away from the Phoenix. They took, and they did. They did. They quit using the Phoenix for almost anything in any
That's what I was
American
thinking. They wanted,
iconography.
when you were saying that, I was thinking they just wanted to have people, like, lead people off the trail, just get rid of the Phoenix, take that piece of the puzzle off the board. And
I'm going to tell you something very interesting too. 100% of my data on the Phoenix phenomenon comes from books prior to 1902. All these books I cite, all this material I cite from the ancient world and historical 16, 1700s, 1800, everything was published prior to 1902. After 1902, there is not a single book that I can cite from which I derived any of my Phoenix thesis data.
that makes sense. It totally makes sense. The next thing that I wanted to ask you and get clarification on is you had talked about, so we have 2040 as the next Phoenix phenomenon event, but you had also said that for the first time in thousands of years, we will also have the Nemesis X event, which takes place every 792 years roughly,
Yes.
taking place at the same time for the first time in thousands of years. When was the last time from your chronological research that the combination of the two took place?
Okay, not combination. The very last time the Nemesis X object was here, it was seen. It was a great black darkness that completely blotted out the skies. And it started basically the decimation of over a third of the world's population. It was 1314 AD. That was the exact date that it passed by, and it was observed. It's also in the period that European historians call the seven comets over Europe, because from 1302 to 1314, seven unusual objects were seen in the sky, but only one of them, the last one in 1314, was this great black darkness, and that was 792 years after 1314 is 792 years to 2046. So this 792 year period appears everywhere. Even after the Great Flood, 792 years after the Great Flood, a vast darkness covered Egypt. And in the Bible, we know this as the Exodus event, the 10 plagues over Egypt. All kinds of devastating things happened. That happened according to many biblical and secular scholars. That event, even the chronologist who used to be a U.S. cryptologist named R.A. Boulay, he did a history of the world for the U.S. military. This man even put together and determined that the Exodus event had to have happened in the year 1447 BC. Emmanuel Velikovsky in 1950 published that as well. So did the Jewish scholar Thiel. We have so many different sources. Biblical chronologist Stephen Jones asserted that the Exodus had to have happened in 1447 BC as well. That is 792 years after the Great Flood cataclysm of 2239 BC, which has been dated by totally different sources multiple times. An easy one to determine is this. Flavius Josephus, 2,000 years, wrote that Abraham was born 292 years after the Great Flood. But we can cite about 40-something Jewish scholars that all assert that Abraham was born in 1947 BC of our calendar. So you just take 1947 BC plus the 292 years of Josephus, and you get what everybody else is saying is the flood date, which is 2239 BC. And that 2239 BC flood date is the exact date provided in 1998 by a scientific consortium of anthropologists, archaeologists, geologists, astronomers that all came together and published their reports, and all of them were in unison that something terrible happened to our world about 2240 BC and reset every single old Bronze Age civilization in our world. So we have, go ahead.
Is that the last time that we've seen those two take place in similar time periods?
No, there's not. I'm just
Okay.
giving you ideas of how this 792-year deal is very confirmed in biblical and in secular chronology. But the last two times, and the only two times in all of world history, that the Phoenix phenomenon every 138 years and the Nemesis X object were in our sky at the same time was the year 522 AD.
522 AD. But you said there was two time periods. What
Come
what
again?
did you say there was two or just one?
522 AD was the last year that both of them were in the sky at the same time. And it was the only time. There's no time. You can take a
Okay.
calculator. Yeah, you can take a calculator and go 138 plus 138 plus 138 and it go all the way back in time, thousands of years. And you can go 792, 792, 792, 7 thousands of years, and you'll never see them join again. But in 522 AD, the great Anno Domini reset, the Justinian plague reset. 522 AD was the last time both of them were in the sky at the same time. And in the last days, it was predicted the two sky dragons would come back to back, but they wouldn't actually be here at the same time. That's what Mother Shipton said, and she's absolutely correct. There's 6.5 years between them. Phoenix returns in May of 2040. The Nemesis X object follows 6.5 years later in the month of November of 2046.
6.5 years?
6.5 years later.
Okay, because I mean, I had the notes for Nemesis 2046 and Phoenix 2040. Now, the other thing that you mentioned in the last conversation was the dark satellite. And you said that this time, and I'm not 100% clear what the dark satellite is, but you said that this would also be around the same time period as Nemesis X and Phoenix as well.
Yes. Yeah. Look, Phoenix is preparatory to the apocalypse period. Nemesis X object begins the apocalypse period, but dark satellite is going to come after this reset. Everything is calmed. Dark satellite is very unusual. Let me explain.
Can you repeat what you just said about the timeline of Phoenix, Nemesis, dark satellite?
Okay, yeah, let me give you a little more detail so you'll understand. Okay, here's what you need to understand. The sixth seal of the apocalypse is the return of Phoenix. Phoenix causes the world to roll like a scroll. It's a pole shift. 2040, the rocks fall from the sky. People hide in the caves. The moon turns red as blood. The sun turns black as sackcloth of hair. These descriptions are very common to what we find in Greek, Egyptian, and ancient Akkadian records concerning the appearance of Typhon, the phoenix. So we have in the sixth seal, though, is not the apocalypse. Anybody who has done a good, thorough reading of the book of Revelation sees that before the apocalypse can unfold, all seven seals have to be broken. Once the seventh seal is broken, then the scroll of the future is opened. And once the prophet reads what's in the scroll, the apocalypse, that's when two things happen. To those who have chosen the world, they're going through cataclysmic stuff. For those who have chosen the spirit, the apocalypse is a revelation. That's what it means. It means a unveiling. They're going to be receiving all kinds of new information. It's a mass awakening. And they're also prepared for an event, which is called the Exodus. This is why the world in the book of Revelation is called Egypt. Now, the Phoenix only prepares the world for those who are watching for the events. The pole shift and the destruction that unfolds is said. The seven seals result in 1/4 of the world dying. That's 25%. That means that the seven seals and the Phoenix phenomenon in 2040, that means that there's 75% survival rate that go into the apocalypse. Then once the seventh seal's nothing. It's a silence in heaven it's a respectful silence after a disaster. The sixth seal is a disaster, Phoenix. then we have about a six month period to a year, and then the first trumpet is blown, which is the beginning of the apocalypse. Trumpets announce judgments, war. This is God's war against a rebellious humanity. Now the first trumpet is blown, and all of a sudden we have some unusual phenomena happening. Second trumpet is blown, and now we have exactly what the Mayan prophecies predicted: the total collapse of time. This is, yeah, now I don't know if you're familiar with, I had a book published in 2011 called Anunnaki Homeworld, where I'm showing in my book that 2012 was never the end of the Mayan long count, and that 2046 is the true end of the 1,872,000 days of the Mayan system, which is divided by 13 Bactans. Go ahead.
Does that have anything to do with the 5 days that were added to the calendar?
Yes, that's the dark satellite. That has 100% to do with the dark satellite. I'll get to that in just a second.
Okay, sorry.
Second. So the Mayan system was very specific. They claimed that there would be an invasion of demons at the collapse of the 13th Bactan under the 13th heavens. Now, keep in mind, the book of Revelation, all these events are unfolding in the 13th chapter. So the 13th portion of the world is the Americas. The rest of the world were divided in between sectors of 1 through 12. So we have this calendar that's only focused on North America, the ancient Mayan calendar. The ancient Maya said that at the end of this calendar, not only would there be a total cataclysm, but time would collapse. This is exactly what we find in the 7 trumpets of Revelation, because it says, and it's very specific, it says that 1/3 of the day, 1/3 of the night, 1/3 of the sun, 1/3 of the moon, and 1/3 of the sun, the day, the night, the stars. Yeah, 1/3 of the sun, 1/3 of the moon, 1/3 of the stars, and then 1/3 of the day and 1/3 of the night. So it is a perfect description of 1/3 of time being removed. It's called the quickening, and it's an act of mercy, because times will get so bad that God abbreviates the time. It makes it shorter. But the removal of that means that a 365.25 day year is now 243 days long. It also quickens time on a daily basis. It's no longer 24 hours a day. It's now 16 hours a day. And this now opens a can of worms in other prophetic texts like 2nd Esdras, that says in the last days, because of so many earth changes, women will give birth to monsters, and that they'll come out the womb able to talk. And it says all these unusual things are going to be happening during the apocalypse. This is what 2nd Esdras tells us, and it's only possible in a world that has been quickened. So,
which book you said, Ezra?
2nd Esdras. This was
Esdras.
removed. It was 2nd Esdras. It's Esdras. This is Ezra, but it's Greek. So
where does this come from historically? Like what?
First and 2nd Esdras were removed from the canon of Scripture. They used to be part of the Bible. They were removed from the canon of Scripture because they detail some very significant things. One of the things that they convey is that the Old Testament was 100% completely lost, and it had been rewritten in the days of the Jewish priest Ezra. And it's admitted by the Jews that they didn't even have the books of Moses. All of that was totally, absolutely created in order to give those people a religion, something they could get behind. It did not exist. These were Babylonian records that were basically Hebraicized. This is the story in 1st and 2nd Esdras and the book of Nehemiah in the Bible. Nehemiah wasn't even a prophet. Most people don't know that Ezra and Nehemiah, these 2 books in the Bible, are about the revision of the Old Testament after it had been lost. They admit it had been lost. No one had access to it. And they claim that Ezra had a dream and he was able to rewrite the whole book, the whole Old Testament. And a lot of Christians and a lot of Judeo-Christians do not want to hear this information, but it's there. It's why 1st and 2nd Esdras was removed from the canon, because it tells the story. But it also tells the story of some very, very detailed, specific events that are going to unfold during the apocalypse. These 2 books are fascinating. They are now a part of today's Apocrypha. If you get a copy of the Apocrypha, they're both in it.
I've looked into the Apocrypha and the Nagamadis and all that, but I'm still not heard of those two names specifically that I'm familiar with. So
Yeah,
I'm definitely going to deeper dive.
First and second Esdras, they're in every Apocrypha. You'll find them. You'll see them. But Esdras, don't let it confuse you. That's just the Greek for Ezra.
Okay. It's interesting too how you're able to take the book of Revelation and what's written in it and combine it in with the research to mark events.
Well, I mean, think about this. I mean, the Mayan long count says an invasion of demons at the collapse of time. All right, I show with a calculator. In my book, Anunnaki Homeworld, which was published before 2012, I was showing that the entire world is wrong. 2012 is not the end of the Mayan long count. Here's how you factor it, and it's a day count system. It ends in 2046. So, yeah, you would have to go to Archaix Treasury to see the book.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to let everybody know that they can get access to your plethora of work, man, because again, you have so much work. But all the books you can find on archaix.com /treasury. So I definitely encourage people to make sure that they're exploring your website, because your YouTube channel only is like a piece of your research, where you can find everything that Jason has done at his website. I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, I appreciate the shout out. Yeah, you can get lost in the website. I've got a lot of free stuff on there too.
You can definitely get lost 100%. What were you going to say about the dark satellite? Because you kind of went into the Phoenix and the Nemesis, talking about Revelation, kind of giving the May 2040 for Phoenix, November 2046 for Nemesis X, and you said the dark satellite would come after.
Yes. Okay. I'll give you. Let me give you. Dark satellite was the dark satellite. The first historical appearance of the dark satellite was in 1899 BC. And it acted like a weapon, and it caused an electrical discharge to attack a construction project in Akkad. Amar Udaak was over that construction project, and this is the origin to Tower of Babel story. The dark satellite, if you remember the Tower of Babel story, we have these different identities that are claiming to be God talking to each other. They're sitting there having a conversation about mankind being too imaginative, too creative, too innovative. We're not going to be able to stop them. They specifically said that mankind, if we allow him to continue this course, by virtue of imagination, there's nothing that will be impossible for him. So they initiated a reset instantly, but they also changed the programming. We don't know how they did it, and it can only happen in a hologram. It could not happen in a real reality. But somehow they introduced 69 other communication systems, other languages. They took a people who all spoke the same language and all of a sudden had them so discombobulated they couldn't work together anymore. And people had to separate into groups by language family. This is the story of the Tower of Babel. And then they couldn't stay in the same place anymore because they don't even understand each other, and people started going their own different direction. They created this division, this reset. And what's interesting about it, I have a video on YouTube about the Babel reset. It's not just a story in the Bible. This story was told all over the world, and I cite all the different sources that I have found this story about this division of tongues, and that we all spoke one language at one time until the gods reset it. But that was the first time the dark satellite appeared. Dark satellite appeared again in 713 BC and changed every single calendar of the ancient world.
When?
713 BC.
Sorry.
When it appeared, our year of 360 days, which every calendar before 713 BC, and I show this, I have a list in my published books showing the source materials that show every civilization of the known world used a year of 360 days. And then in 713, I have a second list for all the civilizations in the world in 713, 712, and 711. that changed their calendars to 365 days because something happened. And even in the Old Testament, we hear what happens. An object appeared in the sky, and an electrical discharge incinerated 185,000 Assyrian soldiers wearing metal helms and metal shields, metal armor, and vaporized them outside of Jerusalem. 185,000 Assyrian soldiers were acted like an antenna, and they were vaporized. But at the same time, the prophet Isaiah was summoned into the court, and he was told to explain why the shadow on the sundial of Ahaz had not only stopped, but had retrograded 10 degrees. Isaiah, if he was a scientist, he would have said, well, that's not possible unless the sun has gone back 10 degrees in the sky, which means our world stopped rotating and then started going back in the other direction for a short period of time. He didn't say all that. He said, well, it's obviously a judgment of God. It's a sign from God that he's going to deliver you from the Assyrians. And this was told to King Hezekiah. So this was 713 BC. It was seen again in 76 AD as a great javelin in the sky. But where we get our information about the dark satellite is Akkadian sources say that the 7 kings were imprisoned in a moon. This is what it said. But we have in 1881 and 1882, we have some mystic writings from a man named Charles Burgoyne. And until this day, I do not know where he got his information. But in his books, he gives an entire chapter, and I cite him in my videos. I read whole passages of the book. He explains that very old occult traditions convey that there is a small collective of gods that hate humanity, that are trapped on an old dark moon that periodically visits our world, and only when they're at perihelion, so close to our world, not at aphelion when they're far away. When they're at perihelion, they can actually influence the unfolding of human events. They can even use their moon, like, or whatever it is, as a weapon. But he calls it the dark satellite. That's where I got the name.
Did you mention this eventually crashing onto Earth and releasing whomever might be imprisoned?
Absolutely. 2052 AD. In the middle of the apocalypse in 2052 AD. It's known in the book of Revelation as the return of the 7 kings.
And you're able to do all this just because, based on your research, you've come to the conclusion that reality is nothing but a mathematical construct.
Well, yes. Well, that's definitely a conclusion. But a lot of these pieces I put together because I'm just very well read in the old text, such as the fact that Akkadian prophecy is very clear. That the 7 kings ruled the old world until there was a cataclysm, but they were promised that they could continue their rule in the future. So putting all these fragments together from different traditions, and then the unfolding of the book of Revelation is basically the unfolding of events that are a continuation of the social structure that existed in the days of Noah. What was going on in the pre-flood world up until the flood is now going on in reverse, starting with the beginning of the apocalypse. The return of the 7 kings get to finish their rule. They get to finish the project that they had started. They're on a scheme. They're doing something, using humanity to do it. And the rest of the book of Revelation is the unfolding of this government of the 7 kings and what they're doing until the return of the chief cornerstone. They're not going to suffer another flood. That's already happened to them. Now they're going to suffer actual defeat by this figure, this enigmatic entity we know very little about, that's only referred to in symbol. He's called the stone uncut by human hands. He's called the stone the builders rejected. They're the builders. The 7 kings are the builders. He's called the chief cornerstone.
Sounds like you're talking about Christ.
He's also called the head of the corner.
It sounds like you're talking about Christ.
Okay, well, let's analyze that for a second. All right.
Like
First of all,
the man that we call the man that we are known to be Jesus, Yeshua, or whatever. It's what it sounds like because they refer to
okay.
him as that.
I
He refers to
I
himself as
want to
that.
draw something to your attention. References to the stone, this entity, predate Christianity, but I'm going to agree with you that the Christian records are definitely referring to this individual.
Okay. Whether or not
We need to be clear because a lot of people are unaware that almost 100% of the Christian material is pre-Christian itself.
okay, that makes sense. That totally makes sense. Okay, so that gives me a lot of clarification on the three and pretty much answered most of my questions that I wanted some clarification on. And again, I want to be respectful of your time. So one of the things that you did mention, we had talked about maybe moving into the direction of talking about some predictions, which I guess a lot of this has been prediction based, but
Yeah,
specifically, we have September 2023. You've talked about on the last time you came on with me, and I know you've mentioned it other places about a false Carrington event, a false flag event that would potentially take down the power grid, taking down the internet. You're saying, based off research, that this would potentially be blamed on some sort of artificial intelligence, which interestingly enough, since you've come on, we've had the rise of Chat GPT and all these other learning AI programs that people are utilizing now. That just exploded literally. Like since I mean, I know it's been ongoing, but it just seems to like come to the public and exploded, gone mainstream since we talked. Um, can you expand more about on that topic of the
sure.
September 2023 false Carrington event?
Sure. On my channel, I have two videos where I go into the historical records on the 1859 Carrington event. The reason I did it was because I came into contact with some naysayers, people who are trying to claim that the history is false and that something unusual did not happen in 1859. So I wanted to get to the bottom of it. They say that it was all invented and made up. So I pulled out some books from the 1870s and 1880s, and I looked in there and I found out that they mentioned the Carrington event, and they mentioned this dude. I think it's Andrew Carrington or something. I don't remember what his whole name was, but the scientific reports do exist. They did have telegraph wires that fried, but I also found other things like some weird aerial phenomena was also documented in 1859. So this was enough for me to say, okay, well, let me go ahead and enter this into OPHIS. Now, for those who don't know, OPHIS has always been a side project of mine. It's date sequence predictive analytics. One of its 14 operations is isometric projections. The reason I call them isometric projections is because I am 100% on board and convinced now that our holography has the architecture of our holography is based on very definitive and easily shown mathematical principles. So, being that reality itself is a type of architecture, I can use architectural terms like isometric projections. An isometric projection is basically the mirror image of something going in one direction to the other. It's like a palindrome. The exact number of days going into the past is how many days I would go into the future to be able to see something. Now,
How do you determine that date though, that you're basing the information of kind of like what happened in the past on like 20 years ago from
okay,
this
I
time
don't really
period?
have to determine it. I really don't have to determine it. This is the beauty, Bryce. This is the beauty of studying calendars, such as the fact that I learned that 1902 is very important to the Great Pyramid. 1902 is very important to the Phoenix calendar. So 1902 being an epicenter for me to use, then I would just go forward and backward from 1902, and it's astonishing what I found. I even have a whole video showing that the events of the Civil War are equidistant to the events of World War II, how they unfolded the series of battles, even the participants. It is amazing. It's like
Yeah.
we're looking at this holographic display, and the epicentral year I used was 1902.
I
But
mean, it's
Edgar,
fascinating and I find it to be very valid. I was just curious at where you found that center point to gauge.
yes, well, you can find this is the deal. You have to find. You can't just pick a date out. I mean, that's just too arbitrary. You have to see evidence for it. I'll give you an example. In the year 1998, there were some significant events about Trump. So I was very interested about Trump, and I did a video about him, and I have the chart still on my channel. And I show that every year going back in time from 1998, I showed all the significant events in Trump's life. Donald J. Trump. So I took 1998 and I went forward to 1999, 2000, 2001, 2002, all the way to 2016. Doing that, I showed across the board how it forms a pyramid, and the events on both sides of 1998 are equidistant, but in each time, it totally, absolutely mirrored the events he had experienced before. Let me give an example. If 8 years after 1998, Donald Trump was interviewed by a major news network or something about the possibility of becoming the U.S. president, then I just looked at 1998, took a calculator, went 8 years after that, and I find out on Oprah Winfrey, she joked, "You're going to be president of the United States." And I showed this over and over. It is so persuasive. Man, we're able to do this with everything. You can do it with your personal life. You can do it with nations and all that. So by this method, I had basically determined in 2020, I released in late 2020 and early 2021. As a matter of fact, my most important videos, 3 of them were released within a week after Trump was removed from office. And when the entire world was going in the one direction, saying it's over, it's game over for the Patriots, it's game over, the socialists and Democrats have now taken over, there's not going to be any more elections, they did this. So when the whole world was doomsaying, saying that the masks were the new normal, when the whole world was talking about this is the end, this is how the globalists are going to take control, I ran office on all these events. And I published my findings. They're still there today. I have an entire playlist called Predictions. All those videos are still up there. And in my predictions videos, I specifically said that according to the office output, Donald Trump's going to remain in politics and be a strong political force right here in America. He's not going to return as president, though. Nancy Pelosi is going to be removed. Biden is not going to finish his term. He should be removed around mid. I said he should be removed mid-term. Now, some people have misconstrued that and say Jason predicted Biden would be removed at the midterms. I never said that.
Right.
I said midterm, just like Nixon was. So, I've also predicted that he's not going to be impeached. I believe 100%, like Nixon, he's going to resign. He's going to be forced to resign by his own party.
To pause you, the Pelosi thing, she stepped down. Do you think there was more to that? Because I mean, she had made an announcement to step down and all that because she had been involved in the political game for quite some time, and I guess she had profited off of her husband being able to trade, taking advantage of insider information. But you think that she was pressured to step down?
Oh, no doubt. There's no doubt in my mind. People do not relinquish power. She still has 10 more years life on her. You know what I mean? People don't just relinquish power. They're forced out of power. Just like the lady in New Zealand, the one who stepped down 3 years after she stepped up. She's supposed to be the new poster child for the Liberal Party in New Zealand. And all of a sudden, after 3 years, no one's making her step down. And she's got some more years ahead of her. And she just all of a sudden, it's blowing people's minds. But I even predicted Trudeau. This is what my predictions said. My predictions state that during the Biden presidency, and he's not going to finish his term, we're going to see a total flip. I have a lot of people that are now getting on board, Rice, because they now see it. A lot of these people were my former critics, but now they see it's all happening at the same time. I said specifically in my predictions videos that late night show comedians and talk show hosts that have been pushing this liberal narrative are going to start losing ratings, losing their jobs. I said big tech is going to start getting audited by the U.S. government and other governments. There's going to be some big tech monopolies broke up and taken over. This has already started happening.
Yeah, I was gonna say. So I've heard something recently about like your late night talk shows, like with Jimmy Kimmel and Jimmy Fallon. Those shows have been losing ratings. They've been going down on views. And one of the shows that have been apparently in the same time slot that have been kicking their ass is I think it's on Fox, Gutfeld. So
Oh yeah,
his ratings have apparently have
yeah,
picked up and like trounced, I think even a
yeah.
combination of. So it's interesting how you're saying that, and I'm trying to give some parallels of things that have actually taken place to show
Oh
that
yeah,
what
there's a
you
lot of
said.
them. The
Oh, I
Twitter
know.
files. The Twitter files I didn't. You got to understand. The predictions aren't so detail specific that I can claim that I predicted the Twitter files. What I had predicted through Office was that there's going to be a flip in the media. There's going to be a flip in the world where people are going to start seeing that all the liberal socialist policies are collapsing. They're going to be removed from power. They've lost their finances, their financial structure and funding. Soros Foundation. I even predicted that the WEF was going to take major flack and that they're going to lose all kinds of international support as a new power structure starts emerging into the world, and that people start abandoning globalism and start going to more nationalist policies. We're seeing this all over the world right now.
We
So
are.
we're seeing every bit of it. So I also predicted that the Republicans would take back the House. I did not predict a red wave. You've never heard red wave come out of my deal, but I did predict that the conservatives were going to take back most of their positions, and they did. They did. We have some really interesting unfolding events in Arizona and two other states where it looks like again things went south where they should have went north. But those are being rectified by the courts right now. But all in all, we have to take predictions in their proper context. And what I mean is the entire YouTube universe was predicting things in the opposite direction, where I was going totally different from all of them, saying that you guys just be patient because what I'm seeing here, every bit of this is about to get reversed. It's going to get reversed so much in the United States that very quickly the conservatives and Republicans are not only going to take back power in the United States, they're going to undo all the liberal policies, not just from Biden, but going back 50 years. They're going to they're going to succeed in creating an ultra conservative Western world, not just America. It's going to involve Mexico and Canada, European countries. This is going to be a huge turning of the tide, but I also predicted that it's all part of the plan. We are witnessing the takedown of one arm of the deep state to be replaced by another. Because what is necessary is the funding. They need a wealthy America again. They've already fleeced us for everything they can. Now they need the economy to bounce back for about 5 or 6 years because it's all part of their plan. They need a wealthy America. They need a happy America. They need a patriotic America. And they definitely need a Christian Reich that is well funded and with a lot of political power in America, because the next move of the deep state is a war against Jerusalem and the Western world's answer to that war, which is the next crusade. This is World War III. World War III will be over Jerusalem. And the entire plan was written out in the 1880s in Albert Pike's time and published in Morals and Dogma. Just like World War I and World War II unfolded exactly according to the Mazzoli plan, so will World War III. And it will involve the Christian Reich against Islam in the Middle East.
When you were talking about that the last time, the idea of the Republicans getting in control and us kind of going into like a more conservative religious direction, it was making me think about a show called Handmaiden Tales that I haven't watched, but I've heard about, because it talks about things in that realm. And then also it made me look into a few other things. Are you familiar with the Noahide laws?
Yes.
Is that
You're going to
what
see,
would
I
be?
believe you're going to see a return. Yeah, you're going to,
Well,
maybe
that's what I
not
was going to
as,
ask. Is that what would return with that Christian mentality, even though it's not necessarily very Christian?
let me explain what a ultra conservative Christian Reich type government will be like. It would be very fast to do it. Listen, I was born and raised into the Christian whole culture. Southern Baptist, I was 40 years old before I abandoned that. But I'm going to tell you, these people, they may have the best intentions and all, but because of this belief system that they're allied to God, these are also the same people that will sit there and watch other people burn alive and think that it's God's will. Listen, it's terrible. It's terrible what people will do in the name of religious belief and religious ideology. But we live in a very free world today by virtue of liberalism. I'm a conservative, but I understand the advantages of not being totally hardcore conservative. Let me give you an example. Okay. Imagine a world where all of a sudden a lot of the activities that a lot of younger adults, especially females, partake in, which is totally legal today, is all of a sudden outlawed. What about all the websites that have the cam girls, all pornography? What about all these little things people have taken for granted now since the invention of the internet? All these things where you can do in private and in your secret. Imagine when
sin is everywhere for you.
Imagine when it's all criminalized. Imagine when law enforcement is able to go into your computer without you being aware just to make sure that you don't have the wrong things in your files. Imagine when the Christian Reich police come knocking on your door. You have to go answer for that. You know what I mean? This is the type of world I'm talking about. What is this whole population of people who are in the adult industries going to do? It's not a small percentage, my brother.
No, I know. I used to work as a
massive percentage.
I was a deep in gentleman clubs. I know how many people around the world are involved in the sex industry.
There's a whole bunch of people in that type of culture. Imagine all the clubs that will get shut down, all the activities and stuff. No, listen, this is
when does your data point to this event? You know, this change of ideology in America. Do you have like a timeline?
It's gradual. It's gradual, and it's within 2025 to 2029.
Okay,
it's gradual.
I was just curious.
And you do know that I am stringently opposed to the whole 2030 plan.
I'd like to think that we're on the same team here, Jason.
What do you mean?
I wouldn't think that you would be down with any agendas or plans from globalists.
I need to communicate that better. I can understand why you misunderstood me. Yeah, I need to communicate that better.
Sorry.
I am not a proponent of the idea that the WEF even had a 2030 plan. That has all been public misinformation. The deep state does not operate like that. They put out fear porn to get you to fall for it so they can assess reactions and so they can actually move more freely by going in another direction. From the beginning, I have been telling people on my channel that's not true. They do not publish their outcomes. This whole idea that they have to telescope their intentions to the public, this is misinformation as well. There's all kinds of agendas unfolding in our world, but the ones that are highly known by the public are not the real ones.
That's interesting, man. Okay, so right now we're at the 1 minute, 25 minute mark. I want to be respectful of your time. We said we would try to cap this thing off around the 1.5 hour mark. So was there anything else that you wanted to cover in the prediction element, or do you think that you've covered most everything you wanted to today?
Well, I just want people to take things into perspective. You have to understand, it's really easy to go on YouTube now and see all the people predicting that, oh, Biden's going to be removed, or they're predicting conservatives are going to take over in 2024. Or they're predicting all that. It's really easy to do that. Just taking into consideration that these were already predicted 2 years ago when the whole world was going a totally different direction. Predictions must always be taken in context. And so that's the only message I have here, really.
Okay, cool. Well, like I said, man, I want to be able to continue these conversations. I do appreciate your time. I'm going to have links down below for your website, your YouTube channel, which is the website is the best resource. If you guys want to get any of Jason's books, you can find all that on the website. You can also, can you search Jason Breshears on Amazon and find your books there as well?
Yes. But on my channel, I had a benefactor. I do not know who this person is. They have not given me their identity. But on my channel, if you go to the community posts, you will find a post where it talks about the new Archaix AI search feature. Listen, it is ingenious. You're there now. Keep going. Keep going. Stop right there.
I'm looking right here.
Stop right there. That's it. Go right there. uploading right now. Oh no, that's not it. That's not it. I'm sorry. Go back up.
Is it up or down? Is it
right there? Right there. Stop right there. Do you see where it says 5 days ago?
Looking for something in particular? The
Yes.
Archaix search feature goes through all 114 videos and takes you to the material you're looking for. Amazing tool. Donate it to us. And let me copy that link.
Listen, if you copy, a lot of people are copying and pasting that link and putting them on their homepage. I mean, on their home screens. Listen, it is fantastic. Anything that you type in, if it's mentioned anywhere in my 414 videos, it pulls up the exact timestamps and which videos they're in. It's right there.
It's kind of ironic though, with all your research, knowing what the Archaix means. Yeah. Going to my notes so I can make sure the advanced research, chronological history of artificial intelligent X, and you have Archaix powered by AI. I love it, man.
Isn't that crazy? If somebody donated that to me and it works badass, it is awesome.
It's probably something very, very similar to like a Chat GPT, but it's programmed specifically with your information so that all the inputs that are put in by questions are going to search a database based on, because that's how it all works. You have to include, that's why if you go to something like Chat GPT, I don't know if you've ever messed with it, but if you ask certain questions, it's going to have a little bit of a biasness with its answers based off of the data that was put in. So if you were like coming from a Democratic point of view, you could put things in that are anti-Republican and things like that to come up in the search. It's pretty interesting how people can manipulate and modify it. Some people think that it's just free flow of information, but they're limited as of now as to what data they can pull from.
That's amazing. Yeah,
so yeah, I'll include this in the link down below in the video description. And then I will once again just remind people to make sure that they're checking out the playlist with part 1 and part 2 of my first conversation with Mr. Jason Breshears. It's called We Live in a Simulacrum, however you want to pronounce it. And then we have predictions in part 2. So be sure to check those out. And if you're not already subscribed over on the Archaix YouTube channel, I encourage you to do so. Again, everything will be linked down below. And if you can bear with me 1 second, Jason, just going to do the wrap up.
Let's do it.
So ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for tuning in. I greatly appreciate. Make sure you are subscribed to both of my channels. Again, since the last time Jason has been on, I split my content up. Subscribe to Rice TVX and here at Rice Against the Grain. And before we wrap things up, I like to leave you with a positive message. This is the way I like to end all of my videos. I encourage you to be a blessing to others. Treat people how you want to be treated. Be the glitch you want to see in the Matrix. Be the change that you want to see in the world. And until next time, practice change.